Hey there, it's Gary Parrish. It's Friday, February 11th, 2022. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Ion College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. David Cobb is here with me. And please note that the Ion College Basketball Podcast is presented by Jersey Mike's, which is a proud sponsor of the Naismith Award. Jersey Mike's would like to offer congratulations to all the athletes on this season's Naismith Watch list. And we're going to get to that Naismith watch list in just a little bit. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, hey YouTube, please smash that like button like you're Brandon Davies. It's right in front of it. It costs you nothing, but it sure would mean a lot to us. So if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for doing that. Smash the like button while you're here. And also go ahead, if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to the Ion College Basketball Podcast here on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button. It matters. Help us out with that. We thank you in advance. All right. The most notable result from Thursday night, it happened in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Final score, unranked Michigan 82, number 3 Purdue 58. 2 days after beating Illinois by 16, Purdue loses to Michigan by 24. This season, Minnesota and Seton Hall have both won at Michigan, but Purdue could not get that done. David Cobb, is the story here that Purdue got drilled, or is the story that Michigan is 6-2 in its past 8 games and quietly turning the corner after a rough start?
I think the story here in Michigan still being on the bubble after this loss, great for them. But the story to me is what you've been saying for a while. And I think what a lot of people who've been paying close attention have noticed, which is that Purdue's defense is very flawed. And to his credit, Matt Painter certainly did not dance around that last night. I think they're well aware of this. But, to put it in perspective, Maryland gave up 110 points to Iowa last night and is actually ranked ahead of Purdue in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency as of this morning. That paints a pretty bleak picture, in my opinion, of the Purdue defense. And you could excuse it. You could explain it when they were losing games by, one possession like they did at Rutgers or, whatever. But when you go out and get blasted by 24, I think it raises that issue to the forefront of the conversation.
Earlier in the week, Matt Norlander, who has not been permanently replaced on the Ion College Basketball Podcast, by the way, he's just taking a personal day today. And so he'll be with me on Sunday night, I assume. We were talking about national title contenders. It might have been on last Sunday night's podcast. And we were running through them, and he was making me say yes or no, like this is a legitimate national title contender. Gonzaga, yes. Kentucky, yes. Ohio State, no. So on and so forth. And I got to Purdue, and I said yes. And then we went back and tried to trim it down to like eight teams. And I did ultimately have Purdue in there, I think. But I almost left them out. And the reason I almost left them out is because I don't want to say you can't win a national championship with a defense like this. I'm just telling you, it's very, very difficult. It's even difficult to make the Final Four with a defense like this. I don't care how great you are offensively. Like Michigan on Thursday night shot 51.6% from the field and 57.1% from three against Purdue. And now Purdue is ranked 126th in adjusted defensive efficiency, according to Ken Palm. That is incredibly bad for a team that is trying to get to the Final Four for the first time since 1980. I went and looked this up this morning just to provide some context. I went and grabbed the last 5 Final Fours. So it's 20 different teams that have made the Final Four over the past 5 years, if my math is correct. And I went and looked at their adjusted defensive efficiency ratings according to Ken Palm. And here's what I got. Last season's Final Four teams were 9th, 11th, 22nd, and 46th in adjusted defensive efficiency. The 46th was UCLA, which went from the first 4 to the Final Four. We didn't have a tournament in 2020. So we go to 2019. The Final Four teams were 1st, 5th, 9th, and 36th in adjusted defensive efficiency. 2018, the Final Four teams were 3rd, 11th, 17th, and 47th in adjusted defensive efficiency. 2017, the Final Four teams were 1st, 3rd, 11th, and 17th in adjusted defensive efficiency. And then in 2016, the Final Four teams were 5th, 17th, 18th, and 21st in adjusted defensive efficiency. So that's 5 Final Fours, 20 teams, literally nobody ranked outside of the top 50. And it's important to note that these are final season ratings. So it stands to reason that most of these teams, if not all of these teams, improved their adjusted defensive efficiency number as they ran to the Final Four. But either way, the point remains the same. They all finished in the top 50 in adjusted defensive efficiency. Purdue is 126th. And so, again, I'm not saying you can't get there with this defense. Nothing's impossible, I guess. I'm just saying teams don't usually get there with defenses like this.
Yeah, I went through this exact same rabbit hole. What I was looking at, though, was just purely national champions.
Yeah.
And I went back to the beginning of Ken Palm's, data. And Baylor at 22 last year, unless I'm reading this wrong, that's the worst defensive efficiency that's ever won a national title. At 20, and they were 22.
Right.
Which, seems light years away from where Purdue is. And most of them are single digits. In fact, you got a handful that are number one. The 2013 Louisville defense was number one. The 2008, Kansas defense, number one in defensive efficiency rating. So I don't know what to tell you. Like I said, Ken Palm doesn't go out there and play defense for you. You can go out there and find something if you're Purdue. I don't want to cast it as though it's impossible for Purdue to overcome this. I think that's silly because the computers don't decide things, but they are telling. The data is interesting, and it should be taken into consideration here that Purdue could be a first weekend flameout if they get the wrong matchup. I mean, they don't play that well away from home sometimes, and depending on who they draw, that first weekend in that second round game, and what would probably end up being a 7 seed or an 8 seed or a 9 seed or whatever, that team could sneak up on them.
The comparison I've consistently made is to last season's Iowa team. Because people were pretty dismissive of Iowa as a legitimate championship contender because terrific offensively, got the best player in the country. That's all true, but the defense is terrible. And you're not going to win a national championship with that defense. And I think the reason people were so quick to attach that label to Iowa is because Iowa has a history of being really good offensively and not so good defensively. So it was easy to slap that on them. Oh, I've seen this story before. With Purdue, people have been more hesitant to attach that exact same label to them for the exact same reason.
They've been good at defense in the past.
Right.
They've had good defensive teams.
Right. And I think that's why, or at least among the reasons why people aren't talking about this Purdue team the way they talked about last season's Iowa team. But the truth is that Iowa team last season was 3rd in offensive efficiency and 75th in defensive efficiency. Iowa last season was significantly better defensively than this Purdue team is. And what happened to that Iowa team? They did more or less what a lot of people thought they would do, which is get eliminated before the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. In fact, they lost in the second round. They got blasted by Oregon while giving up 95 points. They lost 95-80 in the second round of the NCAA tournament. I'm not predicting a similar fate for Purdue. I just think it's interesting right now if you try, or at least before last night, if you try to stand up and say, I don't think Purdue's not getting to the – if you said it this definitively, Purdue's not getting to the Final Four because they stink defensively and you can't get there with a defense like that, you'd have got a lot of pushback. What do you mean? They got Jaden Ivey. They just beat Illinois. They're awesome offensively. They look the part. People would have pushed back on you. But when you said the same thing about Iowa last season, people didn't really push back. And this Purdue team is worse than that Iowa team on the defensive end of the court. It's just an interesting thing that I think is worth – we've been sort of following it on this podcast for a while now. This is a point that I'm not making for the first time, but it is worth following as the season progresses. Purdue is obviously terrific in a lot of ways, but that defense, man, that's a real fundamental flaw that could lead to exactly what you just suggested, which is an early exit from the NCAA tournament.
Matt Painter last night, I got a quote from him. We had breakdowns in ball screen defense. We had breakdowns containing the bounce. We had breakdowns when we were supposed to double, and we had breakdowns when we were supposed to trap in the post. I could go on for a long time with that. So they know. They know that it's the issue now. Right. I mean, how do you fix it? That's
the thing. How do you, is it possible for a team that's terrible defensively on February 11th to be significantly better on March 11th? Like we've been talking about this all season. The season starts in November. It's February, and they just haven't, whatever the problems are. And I remember Matt talking about this very early in the season, like when they took their first loss. Matt, he's never hid from this. If he were listening right now, he wouldn't be offended or bothered by what I'm saying. He'd probably be nodding and saying, I know what you know. He's a smart guy and a great basketball coach. Is it possible to fix this stuff, by the time you need it to get fixed? Maybe, but
here's what I'm hoping for if I'm Purdue. I bet in some ways it can be difficult to communicate the urgency of the defensive struggles to a team that for the most part is just being universally praised. If you're, Jaden Ivey, Trevion Williams, Zach Edey, everybody on that roster, you're hearing a lot of good things about yourself over the course of this season. You're smoking some teams. Jaden Ivey's in the lottery conversation. Edey and Williams are two of the best bigs in the country, and they probably hear that quite a bit, and it's true. When you lose games by 2 points and you lose once every couple weeks and you're in the top 5 in the country and you're in the running for a number 1 seed, I mean, it can be difficult, I would imagine, to really communicate the urgency of certain areas of improvement, to a roster that for the most part is really excelling, at what they're meant to do. But now maybe last night in that loss, maybe it can be a wake-up call of sorts. Hey guys, we just lost by 24 points to a Michigan team that wasn't even on the bubble, according to Jerry Palm, entering the game last night. So maybe this could be a turning point. If I was going to take a positive approach to Purdue's predicament, that would maybe be the way I would spin it. And I don't know the locker room dynamics there. I don't know if that's the case, but just from thinking of it from a human motivational standpoint, in their 3 losses before last night, they'd lost by a combined 10 points. So, if I'm a player on that team, do I really buy that we're deeply flawed until I see it in a way like I saw it last night? I don't know. Maybe now that'll open their eyes and kind of increase the sense of urgency to get better defensively.
Well, every good coach I know takes moments like last night and uses them to reinforce points they've probably been trying to make. That's why sometimes you hear a coach, the team starts 14-0 or 17-0, and then they take a loss, and you'll hear a coach say, sometimes we needed that. We needed that. They don't want to lose, but you try to find the positive in losing. All right, now maybe they'll listen to me when I say, okay, we're winning. Great, but this is going to catch up to us at some point. This issue that I'm stressing to you is going to get us at some point. When you're dealing with a team that is enjoying a lot of success, I don't want to speak for the Purdue players, but I can just broadly speaking, I can understand how a 19-year-old or a 21-year-old basketball player would be like, hey, all right, coach, we hear you, but we're fine. And then you get smacked the way you got smacked last night, and maybe whatever the coaching staff is stressing today on that end of the court, perhaps it'll resonate a little better than it was this time yesterday, because they got embarrassed last night by a Michigan team, as you noted, wasn't really even on the bubble before last night's game. But, and this will be a place to transition to the Wolverines, I think they probably are now, or they're at least getting close to it. This is a team that started 7-7 overall, 1-3 in the Big Ten. They took losses to Minnesota and UCF, and now they're 13-9 overall, 7-5 in the Big Ten. They got wins over Purdue, Indiana, San Diego State. They're 2-5 in quadrant 1, 3-3 in quadrant 2. So 5-8 in the first 2 quadrants with a quad 3 loss to Minnesota. I don't think that gets you there yet, but you're back in the game. You're back inching in the right direction. Like I said earlier, 6-2 in the past 8. And among the reasons, It's interesting. I guess maybe this isn't interesting at all. Maybe this is just obvious. But when they were struggling early, it was like, the very simple, what's wrong with Michigan? The simple answer was Hunter Dickinson is back for his sophomore year, and he hasn't really taken a jump. He just kind of looks like the same player. He's producing at, more or less the same level. And the 2 5-star freshmen aren't playing like 5-star freshmen. And so
they sure did last night.
They sure did last night. That's my point. When you lose what Michigan lost, and then you are replacing it with 5-star freshmen, the only way to maintain what you were or improve is for the 5-star freshmen to play like 5-star freshmen. And they didn't at the beginning of the season, but they did last night. And Hunter Dickinson played like a different player last night. He got 22 points, 9 rebounds against that Zach Edey, Trevion Williams front line. And he's been on a real tear lately. Past 5 games, Hunter Dickinson is averaging 24 points and 8 rebounds. On the season, he's now averaging 18.3 points, 8.3 rebounds. So why is Michigan suddenly a different team? A lot of different reasons. But among them, Hunter Dickinson has taken it up a level, and the 2 5-star freshmen are starting to play. They're not just good prospects anymore. They've become good college basketball players.
Purdue's defense was so bad last night, Gary, that they made Hunter Dickinson look like Jaren Jackson Jr. hitting threes out there.
No, and he's shooting a not bad percentage from he obviously doesn't take a lot of them, but he's made that shot this season. So again, I don't want to pretend to be Jerry Palm. I'll let him
first 4 in. By the way, I just pulled it up. They were not on the bubble last night. This morning, Palm's got them first 4 in.
He's got last 4 in or last 4 in. Yeah, got it. Okay, so there you go. According to Jerry Palm, they're now on the correct side of the bubble, which is, I don't want to say amazing, but not something I think we would have predicted. When they were 7-7 overall, 1-3 in the Big Ten, it looked like this might just be a Michigan team that goes down as one of the biggest disappointments in the country. Started the season preseason top 10. But now they've got it headed in the right direction. And congrats, Michigan fans. You're now in the field of 68 as projected by the great Jerry Palm. A Clemson player nearly killed a Duke player Thursday night. We're going to get into that next. But first, a word from our sponsors.
We're here. Let's go save some lives.
Wow.
Is that safe?
This isn't an easy mission, and there may be a few surprises.
Come on!
Is this where I get to say I was born ready?
I'm gonna figure this thing out, whatever it takes. It's gonna be close.
We do our best work when it's close.
So a Clemson player nearly killed a Duke player on Thursday night. Duke won the game 82-64 at Little John Coliseum, but the story was the David Collins, Wendell Moore incident. David, I know you saw it. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, that was scary.
Yeah.
All right. So nobody's buying the Collins apology. Nobody's buying it. I want to play the role of his defense attorney here for a second and explain how maybe if you look at it with the right camera angle and put yourself in his shoes, like maybe you can start to understand how that happened. And the outcome of the play is indefensible. The correct call was made. He deserved to be ejected for what happened, and nobody will ever know his true motive. But I know he's apologized. I know he tried to diffuse the situation in the moment, and I know he's still getting a lot of crap, from really everybody on social media. But he issued an apology last night. So I'm going to read this real quick, okay? Mm-hmm. He says, "I was going to try to block it from behind, but I was going too fast, and I couldn't stop. I realized I needed to stop when it was too late. I've never been a dirty player, never will. I wish Bro a healthy season, and I never tried to hurt anybody, but I know everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I have respect towards Duke and Clemson, and I apologize to everybody for a reckless play." And then I think he said, "I'm glad he was okay."
Yep.
So it seems genuine enough, whether you buy it or not. I think if you look at it from like that vertical over the top angle instead of the side angle, you can kind of see how Wendell Moore veered back towards the center of the lane to complete the dunk. and I think kind of interrupted that. Collins was maybe going to go in for that last second swipe as Moore was gathering to rise and dunk, but then Moore just like careens towards the center of the lane. And so maybe, David Collins and that path he thought he was going to have to run underneath him is suddenly erased. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading way too much into this. I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential defense for David Collins.
Well, it's interesting because I was flying last night back from New York, and I caught all of this on social media. And I have, even at this moment, I had seen his apology. I've got it in my notes here. I had not seen the reaction to his apology. I had no idea what the reaction to his apology was. So you're telling me people weren't buying it, that people were still killing him. Yes. What's interesting is that I'm on the same page with you here. When I read the apology, I immediately went back and watched the play from multiple angles. And that's what it looked like to me. It looked like he was running very fast and he didn't stop. Now, it was a dangerous play. I think David called it a reckless play. He deserved to be ejected from the game. But I don't think it was a dirty play. I think it was a dangerous play and a reckless play. When I first saw it, I was like, yo, man, because it seemed like you got stripped. Now you're frustrated. Dirty play. That's what it looked like to me at first. But then when I read his explanation and then went back and watched it, I was like, that's kind of that's what it looks like. It looks like he was, because if you look, he didn't shove him. We've seen those before, like, reach out, shove, that's dirty and dangerous, dirty and reckless. He did not push him.
He really just sort of ran jump.
Yeah, he just sort of ran through him.
Right.
It was almost like if you could think Wendell Moore's going up for a dunk and David Collins ran through him like he's a finish line of a race. That's almost what it looked like. But he didn't push him with his arms or grab him. He sort of ran. He looked like somebody who couldn't stop running.
It was too clumsy to be overtly malicious.
I'm with you. As you tell me, people aren't buying it. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I buy it completely. Like, that is what it looked like to me. And last night when I saw it initially, before the explanation / apology, I was like, ejected and probably needs to be suspended. And now I'm like, ejected, sure, but apologized to Wendell on social media, provided an explanation for what happened. There's no history of this stuff with him, far as I know, and also went over and apologized to Mike Krzyzewski, and like gave him a hug, said, "I'm sorry, that's on me." Can we just stop for a second?
Would in any other circumstance, would any other opposing coach have received an on-court apology from the offending player other than Coach K?
I did think it was unique for sure. But like, he's Coach K. I don't know if you heard, it's his final season, last trip to Little John. So maybe it was appropriate. Either way, I guess before the apology and before I saw it from a different perspective, I was like, probably needs to be suspended. Now, if you put me in charge, he'd be eligible to play the next game. Like, it happened. It should be over.
Another hypothetical for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say this had transpired with Grayson Allen as the offending player. How many pieces of content would we have up on CBS Sports right now about the play?
A lot. That year, Grayson Allen content was like among the most clicked on content for college basketball. Like the best thing you could do is put Grayson Allen's name in a headline. But and I do think this is important to note. If Grayson Allen does that last night to a player, I'm not buying it. I'm saying, okay, you didn't shove him, but you ran through him. You got a history of stuff like this. That's not cool. I do think your past provides context for how we should perceive something. And David Collins, again, to my knowledge, has no history of this. I've never heard or read David Collins is a dirty player. And so given that, honestly, I haven't heard much about David Collins or read much about David Collins, anything. He could be the most amazing young man in the world or the opposite. I don't have any idea. I'm just saying that doesn't appear to be a narrative connected to him in any way whatsoever. And so I'll take him at his word because, I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt given the way that he handled the situation, and B, his explanation actually makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also fathomable that it was even if there was ill intent, the immediate remorse I think also counts for something.
Sure.
And I'm glad that he was immediately remorseful, because I think the reaction that we're seeing and the distrust of his apology and all that is purely a reaction to the magnitude of that fall from Wendell Moore Jr. My gosh.
It looked bad, and it could have ended badly. Like it's fortunate that Wendell was not seriously injured, because he could have been. But that's where I think you got to be careful with the wording. Was it a reckless play? Yes. Was it a dangerous play? Yes. Was it a dirty play? I'm not going to argue about it with people for, hours, but it didn't, after I read his apology and watched it to look for what he said, it looked like what he said. And so I don't know how, as of this moment, the ACC hasn't announced anything. Clemson hasn't announced anything. I don't know how it will ultimately be handled, but if I were in charge of handling it, I'd say it happened. Everybody's okay. I think that matters too. Everybody's okay. Everybody's okay. He apologized. The apology makes sense. He doesn't have a history of a dirty player. Let's let it end right here. Hopefully
If Wendell Moore had to miss 2 games because of this, I could see, maybe it being appropriate for Brownell to, sit Collins for the however many games that Wendell Moore had to miss due to a lower back contusion or something. But, like you said, thankfully that's not what we're dealing with here. The fact that he was able to bounce back and resume playing in that game after a fall like that was a testament to the human body for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see where that story goes, but from my perspective, the story shouldn't go anywhere from here. It should be over. Before we get to the Final Four and 1, we're going to update you on the Naismith watch list. As I told you last week, we're going to be doing a Naismith watch segment presented by Jersey Mike's every Friday, where we'll give you our top 3 candidates in this moment for Naismith National Player of the Year. David, I'll let you go first. If you were submitting a Naismith ballot today, what 3 names would you put at the top of your list?
Well, after we spent the first, 15 minutes or so just ragging Purdue, I'm going to go Jaden Ivey, number 1 on my ballot. He's just – there's nobody like him in college basketball. He makes winning plays all the time for a team that, yes, as we've discussed, has its flaws, but that a team that as of this moment is a top 5 team. And if I were voting on it now, he would be the guy. I'm kind of leaning towards wanting to see a guard win it this year, because the last 3 have been Garza, Obi Toppin, and Zion Williamson. All 3, deserving winners. But actually, you go back the last time a guard won it, it was Jalen Brunson, the year that Villanova won the national title. And so for that reason, my number 2 is Ochai Agbaji. And I know he's had some moments where he's kind of disappeared offensively in the last couple of weeks, but he's reached double figures in every game this season. And Kansas is a team that could maybe win the national championship, and he's a superstar for that team. So, I've got Kofi Coburn and Johnny Davis and Drew Timme rounding out my top 5, but I would probably go Ivy and Agbaji as my top 2 right now.
It's interesting because last week I made the point that I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite. Like sometimes by February, it is obvious who everybody should be voting National Player of the Year if the vote were happening in this moment. Zion Williamson was that. I think Luka Garza was probably that. I don't think we have that guy this season. Evidence being that your top 2 aren't even in my top 3. And it doesn't mean that your top 2 are crazy. It just means that there's not an obvious favorite at this point. And there's a lot of candidates. Jaden Ivey, Ochai Agbaji, Kofi Coburn,
Leaky Black.
Leaky Black, is an incredible perimeter defender, and probably should that should be taken into account when you're discussing National Player of the Year candidates. But my top three aren't any of those players. My number one right now remains Oscar Tshiebwe. He's averaging at Kentucky 15.9 points and 15.1 rebounds in 30.3 minutes per game for a team I've got ranked third in the top 25 and one. So he's a statistical monster on a legitimate national title contender. He got 18 and 14 earlier this week at South Carolina. He's now number one in defensive rebounding percentage. And this surprised me because he has been number one in offensive rebounding percentage as well for much of the season, but he's now number two in offensive rebounding percentage. Trivia time. Which player is now ranked number one in offensive rebounding percentage according to KenPom?
Zach Edey.
He's, I think, third. He's up there pretty high. David McCormack at Kansas is at 19.7%. Tshiebwe is at 19.4%. So he's not number one in both anymore, but he's number one in one and number two in the other. He's an incredible rebounder. So he would be my leader right now, but not by a wide margin. And there's a scenario where he might not even be in my top three next Friday, depending on how the next week unfolds. But right now, I would keep him where I had him last week, which is number one. My number two, Johnny Davis at Wisconsin. He's averaging 20.8 points, 8.2 rebounds, 2.5 assists for a team I got ranked eighth in the top 25 and one. Patrick Herb, who is the director of brand strategy at Wisconsin, been working in the Wisconsin athletic department for a long time, like terrific guy. Great to work with. He sent a note along and had some really interesting statistical stuff connected to Johnny Davis. Wisconsin has played 7 games this season against teams that at the time of the game were ranked in the top 25 of the AP poll. And in those games, Johnny Davis is averaging 25.3 points, 8.6 rebounds. So he's, really playing incredibly well against the best competition. In Wisconsin's 3 biggest wins, so that's at Purdue, against Houston out in Las Vegas, and at Michigan, Johnny Davis was phenomenal. He had 37 points against Purdue, 30 against Houston, 25 at Michigan. And just for some context here, some of the other player of the year candidates that we've mentioned in games like this. So games against top 25 teams. Again, Johnny Davis is averaging 25.3 points, 8.6 rebounds. And Wisconsin has a 4-3 record in those games. Ochai Agbaji is averaging 20.8 points. And that's second most among the player of the year candidates in these types of games. And Kansas is 3-3 in those games. Drew Timme is averaging 20.4 points, 6.8 rebounds. Gonzaga's 3-2 in those games. Kofi Coburn is averaging 19.5 and 9.3. That's good. Illinois is 1-3 against top 25 teams. Jaden Ivey, 18.7, 5.8. Purdue is 5-1 in those games. And then Oscar Tshiebwe, 13.4 points, 14.6 rebounds, but Kentucky's only 2-3 in those games. So Johnny Davis is averaging nearly 5 points better than any other legitimate National Player of the Year candidate when playing against top 25 teams. So if you're somebody who likes, and for me, National Player of the Year comes down largely to you got to be a great player and you got to be on a good enough team. Like, if you're ranked 47th at KenPom, I don't really care what you're doing. You can be an All-American, but you're not going to be the National Player of the Year. You've got to be statistically good or great. You got to be on a good enough team. And if you want to add to that somebody who does it when the lights are on, somebody who does it against the best competition, if that is something that matters to you as a voter, well, then Johnny Davis is the best so far this season, when it comes to playing against other top 25 level schools. So I've got 1 Oscar Tshiebwe, 2 Johnny Davis, and then third, this is a new addition to my list, Chet Holmgren at Gonzaga. He's now averaging 14.6 points, 9.1 rebounds, 3.3 blocks in 25.5 minutes per game for a team that I now have ranked number 1 in the top 25 and 1. He's shooting 64.5% from the field, 46.5% from 3. His true shooting percentage is now up to 74.1. And I saw this from Jared Burson, who's a researcher at ESPN, who's a terrific follow, by the way, on Twitter, because he's got just every night just wild statistical stuff, historical context for what we're watching. Like I grab a lot of his notes and use them, which is why I wanted to give him credit. I'm not stealing from him. I'm just borrowing. Again, Jared Burson, a researcher for ESPN. Everything I'm about to tell you is stuff that I've read from his Twitter feed. But if Chet Holmgren were to finish the season at 74.1 true shooting percentage, it would be the second highest true shooting percentage by a Division I player in the past 30 seasons. I mean, we don't see stuff like this. Now, what's interesting is that what I just said is true, but there is a player who has a better true shooting percentage in college basketball this season. It's Keller Boothby at Cornell, who has a true shooting percentage right now of 76.6. So shouts to Keller Boothby. But Chet Holmgren is having a statistically great season. Here's another
Gary,
one.
what does Keller Boothby have to do to get on your top 5 for next week?
You know what? I had never heard of Keller Boothby until about 90 minutes ago when I was prepping for this. But now he's on my radar. So I'm going to keep trying.
I want to see Keller and Leaky Black get a little more love, okay?
Keller Boothby is the type of player. How about this? If Keller Boothby finishes the season with a better true shooting percentage than Chet Holmgren, he is under consideration for a lifetime shout out on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. That's the race I don't think people have been paying enough attention to this season. The Chet Holmgren Keller Boothby true shooting percentage race that is happening, that's unfolding a little off the radar, but it's on my radar now.
Is this an addition potentially, or is this at the peril of Leaky Black or Devin Downey?
No. I think once you get added to a consistent shout out on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, you are not replaced unless you disrespect us the way Terry Teagle once did. People sometimes ask, why does Terry Teagle not get the shout out at the end anymore? And it is because somebody sent us an interview that somebody did with Terry Teagle, the Baylor legend. And they said to him, so you get a shout out on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports, every episode. Did you realize that? And he said, no. He acted like he didn't know who we are. In fairness, he might not know who we are. Okay, that's fair. I understand, but I took that, as Michael Jordan might say, I took that personally, and so I'm not going to shout out Terry Teagle anymore because he publicly said he didn't even know that we existed. I found that to be disrespectful and insulting. So now, instead of Terry Teagle has been replaced, but he's been replaced by a different Baylor player every episode. I have the entire list of everybody who's ever played basketball at Baylor. And so instead of Terry Teagle, we just shout out another Baylor player at the end of every episode. So that's that.
Yeah. So if Keller Boothby finishes the season with a better true shooting percentage than Chet Holmgren and doesn't do anything crazy like speak ill of the Drew family or something like that.
That's right.
Then he'll be, commemorated henceforth.
There's no question. I give you my word. I don't always keep my word, but I'm going to try my best to keep it here. Keller Boothby finishes with a better true shooting percentage than Chet Holmgren and acknowledges our existence. He will get a permanent shout out on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Back to Holmgren, another little thing Jared Burson tweeted, at some point in the past week or so. Chet had a 4-game stretch recently where he averaged 19.5 points, 10.3 rebounds, 3 3-pointers per game, and 3 blocks per game over a 4-game stretch. And that made him the first Division I player to average at least 15 points, 10 rebounds, 3 blocks, and 3 3-pointers in a 4-game span in the last decade. Again, with Holmgren, he's figured it out, and he is doing things that are, obviously uncommon. And, we were in studio Wednesday night, Inside College Basketball on CBS Sports Network, and Adam Zucker, asked me if Drew Timme was still a, legitimate National Player of the Year candidate. And I said, well, of course. He's been terrific, but he might not be the best National Player of the Year candidate on his own team anymore. It might actually be Chet Holmgren. In my eyes right now, if I were picking one Gonzaga player to be National Player of the Year, I'd probably have to go with Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make the case that the two most important players in the country are Chet Holmgren and Walker Kessler, because those two players change the ceilings of what their teams can accomplish. Because if you go and look at Auburn as a defensive team with Walker Kessler versus Auburn as a defensive team without him, it's a massive difference. And it's the same with Gonzaga. And so I think in the end, maybe the Naismith voters would side more with Timme in some ways as a lifetime achievement award. Mm-hmm. And due to the points per game average likely being higher when it's all said and done than Holmgren's is. But I'm not going to argue with you on the importance of Chet Holmgren. And I think some people are going to discount some of these statistics that you're throwing out and some of these observations that you've made. And they're going to point to the caliber of competition as the reason why it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be touting Chet Holmgren's improvement. But I'm on board with the fact that I think he's figuring it out. And I think that will be evident when they reemerge, from WCC play, and whoever they play in the second round of the NCAA tournament in their first game against a, real legitimate team in a while. No offense, St. Mary's or San Francisco. I think that improvement will be on display, because I think it'll be a different Chet Holmgren than the one we saw against Alabama and Texas Tech and those other teams they played.
It is a fact that he is doing it against West Coast Conference competition. There's no other side to that. It's true. He is doing it against West Coast Conference competition. But BYU's good, and he's doing this against, the good West Coast Conference teams as well. Would he do exactly this in the Big Ten? I don't know, but I think he'd be great anywhere, obviously. Yeah. I think he'd be great anywhere. And either way, the point remains the same. Good players play in bad leagues all the time in college basketball. Great players play in bad leagues all the time in college basketball. And the West Coast Conference ain't as bad as it probably is perceived. There's some good teams in that league. They're going to get, maybe 3 or 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. He's the fact that he's doing things that have never been done in a decade, or by any Division I player, or things that have only been done by one other player in the past 30 seasons. When you're doing historically great stuff like that, it means you're special. And he is so clearly special in what is going to be his one season of college basketball. Matt Norlander, by the way, has got a nice piece up on Chet Holmgren right now. If you haven't seen it, I believe it posted on Thursday. You can find it at cbssports.com. Before we get to the Final Four and one, let me ask you a question. Are your go-to game day foods feeling uninspired? Next time, skip the usual suspects and order Jersey Mike's. At Jersey Mike's, they make every sub to order with premium fresh sliced meat, and cheesesteaks are cooked on a flat-top grill. Download their app for delivery, curbside, or in-store pickup. Jersey Mike's is a proud sponsor of the Naismith Award and a proud maker of a sub above. All right, it's time for the Final Four and one, which David Cobb is actually the king of this season. Nada, please unmute yourself and update us on the records.
Well, GP, I know you're a Mets fan,
yep.
so you're going to understand this really well. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like you're coming down the stretch and you're kind of falling apart at the wheels. It's 26-31. Norlander is 34-23, and then David Cobb, who's not going to be caught on win percentage anytime soon, is 6-2.
Oh man, I'm in trouble this week. I mean, I'm in trouble every week, but looks like I'm especially in trouble this week. Game 1, Saturday, noon Eastern. Number 20 Texas at number 10 Baylor, inside the Huck the Dog Center. KenPom has it Baylor -5. You can watch it on ESPN2.
Give me Baylor. So I know Texas is riding high. They've had some big wins recently. I think they've won 5 out of 6, with the only loss being that crazy game at Texas Tech. But I think Baylor is starting to figure some things out here. I think if LJ Cryer comes back, I'll feel a lot more confident about this pick. But, even without him, I think this is a spot where Baylor will emerge and start to look like the national title contender we thought it was a few weeks ago, and the number one team we thought it was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, as of this moment, we do not know whether LJ Cryer will play. He's been like a game time decision, multiple games now, and has not played. Baylor, of course, last weekend got blasted by Kansas, bounced back pretty well, and won by 15 at Kansas State. And I know Kansas State isn't great, so you might be dismissive of that, but Kansas State has played 7 games this season decided by 1, 2, or 3 points. So 3 or fewer points. And they're 2-5 in those games. Like, if you take those games, and like Bruce Weber is in an important year at KSU, obviously. And man, it's just wild to me sometimes to think about how thin the margins are between you're coming back next season to coach again, or you maybe not. 2-5 in games decided by 3 or fewer points. And if you take those, the 2-5 record and make it 5-2, which is like all you got to do it is get a stop here, make a shot there. Get a stop here, make a shot there. The game is different. Outcome's different. You take that 2-5, flip it into 5-2, and Kansas State's a projected NCAA tournament team right now. As it is, they're one of the, they're struggling and sitting here with a 4-7 record in league play. They're 12-11 overall. My point is this. It might not seem like it's some grand achievement to go to Kansas State and win. And to be clear, it's not like going to Kansas and winning or going to Auburn and winning, but that was a nice win. Kansas State isn't as bad as its records suggest. I guess that's the point I would make. And for Baylor to go in there shorthanded to win by 15, I thought was impressive. Texas is quietly starting to figure this thing out too. We talked about Michigan earlier in the show about how they got off to a not so great start, and now they seem to be figuring it out with a lot of new pieces. Texas, same thing. 6-1. 5-1 in the past 6 games. Lone loss in that stretch was that wild and weird game at Texas Tech. The Longhorns are now up to 14th at KenPom. So that's a team that when they lost 3 of 4 in January, including losses to Oklahoma State and Kansas State, you were like, okay, maybe this just isn't going to be a really great year in year one with Chris Beard. But now they're obviously trending in the right direction. They've been playing a lot better than they were in January. And I'll take them to cover this number at Baylor. I don't think they win the game, but given that they've been playing better, Baylor's been a little up and down. Baylor was 4-4 in its previous 8 before the win at Kansas State, and the uncertainty of LJ Cryer. I'll take Texas plus the points in this one. Game 2, Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, Memphis at number 6 Houston inside the Hakeem Olajuwon Center. KenPom has it Houston minus 13. You can watch it on ABC.
Gary, do you ever feel like you're living in deja vu when you do radio in Memphis in the afternoons and you're having this conversation year after year where it's, if Memphis beats Houston, it'll really help their at-large resume. And I think that, they'll have a shot. It just seems like, this 3 years in a row now we've had this conversation?
Penny Hardaway made this point, earlier this week, I guess, after the win over Tulane. He said, we're in the same spot we were last season. We're just on the wrong side of the bubble, and now we're headed to Houston. And like, if we can get this win, it might push us to the right side of the bubble. It is very deja vu like. Obviously, it's one thing to say all we got to do is win at Houston. It's another thing to go actually win at Houston. But we talked about Michigan being disappointing and figuring some things out. Memphis very disappointing, but they've won 4 straight games now, and more important than that, they're mostly healthy. DeAndre Williams is back. Jalen Duren is back. Landers Nolley is back. And, they're operating at a different level now. They beat UCF by 28 points over the weekend and then beat Tulane by 11. So they're I'm not saying they're ever going to be what they were expected to be in the preseason, but they're, if they've been off your radar a little bit, they are playing better right now, largely because they're healthy right now.
Sure. And that is absolutely the correct narrative that Memphis needs to pound home, which Penny Hardaway did quite effectively a few weeks ago, talking about the injured players being missing, because in this year, especially with the COVID, guys missing games, protocols, the selection committee has a lot to sift through with some of these teams that were missing players for certain key games and all that. And if you can wage an effective enough marketing campaign to make them have to acknowledge that in their selections, I think it will help your case. Anyway, as it pertains to this game, I don't know that I can see Memphis going on the road and beating Houston. What's the number? What are we looking at with this?
Houston minus 13.
Oh, wow.
That's a big number.
Golly. I mean, I was pretty comfortable going Houston.
Oh, by the way, I don't think when the number posts, I don't think it'll be that big, because it'll probably still be 11 or something like that. I don't think it'll be 13, because Memphis's computer numbers are goofy because they lost so many games when they didn't have players. And now everybody except Amani Bates, I believe, is back, and you could reasonably argue that they're better without him, right?
Okay, so when I make this pick, will I be judged based on 13, or will I be judged on what Vegas says tomorrow?
We always base it off of whatever we said on this show. So the official line for the Island College Basketball Podcast for the Final Four and 1 is Houston minus 13. Okay.
I am the Final Four and 1 leader, so I need to be sure of these things. All right, so I'm gonna go Memphis against the spread. I think they'll cover 13, but I think Houston will win the game.
I think that's right. I think Memphis will compete with them. Houston, obviously, coming off of a loss at SMU, 85-83. They were up 15 at one point, lost by 2, 12-game winning streak snapped. I think most people know that Houston lost 2 of its top 4 players the week before Christmas. Marcus Sasser, who's their best player, and Tremont Mark out for the season, and it had never showed up. Houston just kept killing everybody. But then they got caught by a pretty good, not great, but pretty good SMU team.
I mean, if you're going to take an L in the AAC on the road at SMU is a somewhat respectable place to do it.
No question. And so, Houston now has a league loss, but I still think it's good. I had always wondered, like, when will it show up that – and I don't say this just about Houston. I made this point on an earlier podcast. Like, I don't care who you are, Duke, Kentucky, Gonzaga, take 2 of your top 4 off your team. You're not the same team. Like, imagine if Gonzaga lost Drew Timme and Andrew Nembhard, or if Kentucky lost Oscar Tshiebwe and Keon Brooks. I mean, you're not the same team. But Houston had largely looked like the same team. Josh Carlton had stepped up. They had largely looked like the same team without Sasser and Mark. But, if perhaps what we saw at SMU was just, hey, it's just one game, no big deal. Houston will get right back to smacking everybody around ASAP. But, they looked like a team maybe missing a piece or two at SMU as they squandered that 15-point lead. You mentioned the committee going to have to sift through all of this data. Well, Tennessee lost this game, but Kennedy Chandler wasn't available. This school lost these games, but this player wasn't available. Hey, remember when Baylor went through this stretch here, LJ Cryer wasn't playing. He's their best player. Well, the best player at Memphis, I guess you could argue it's either Jalen Duren or DeAndre Williams. Like, you could debate that if you wanted to, but certainly DeAndre Williams is one of the top 2 players at Memphis. He wasn't a heralded high school recruit like Jalen Duren, Amani Bates. He's not a household name, but he's a really good college basketball player, 25 years old, by the way. Well, Memphis is 10-4 with him, just 3-4 without him. I don't know what the committee's going to do with that. But Memphis has been, pretty good with him and really bad without him. He's available now. And like I mentioned, Memphis is 2-0 in its past 2 games. Those wins coming by a combined 39 points. So I'll take Memphis plus the points, but I do think Houston wins the game. Game 3, Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Number 22, St. Mary's at number 2, Gonzaga, inside the Dan Dickau Athletic Center. KenPom has it, Gonzaga minus 14. You can watch it on ESPN2.
Yeah, I'm going Gonzaga straight up and to cover. Look, everybody wants you to believe the WCC is having some renaissance season and that it's deeper than ever and that Gonzaga is not the only team that can win a game in the NCAA tournament from that conference. But all I'm saying is that if that's true, St. Mary's better show it on Saturday because I'm not buying it. I mean, Gonzaga is 8-0 in the league. They've won 7 of those 8 games by 25 points or more. And the only one they didn't win by 25 or more was they beat San Francisco by 16 in a game that was played at a really slow pace. So I get it. St. Mary's is ranked. Everybody wants the WCC to be better than it is. Like maybe Gonzaga puts some of that narrative out there itself. But the Zags are going to win this one comfortably. I got them winning it by about 25.
I mean, they've won 5 straight games by at least 30.
Yeah.
I mean, that's outrageous. They're now up to 2nd in offensive efficiency, 8th in defensive efficiency. They're 1st in effective field goal percentage, 1st in 2-point field goal percentage. You know, obviously that's the benefit of having Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren. They're awesome. Again, you know, earlier in the week in studio, it was like, is this the year Gonzaga wins the national championship? And I'm like, you know, we'll see. I don't know, but they are once again good enough to do it. And that's the thing that I think the anti-Gonzaga crowd can't grasp is that just because they haven't won a national championship doesn't mean they can't. They could already have, if we play the NCAA tournament in 2020, theoretically they could already have 3 national championships. I mean, they were in it in the final minutes against North Carolina. They had one of the best teams in 2020. If you want to say they were never winning last season because Baylor was just going to destroy them every time, fine. I'm not going to argue that. But Mark Few could be a 2-time national championship coach right now if you just play that North Carolina game out from the moment it's a 1-possession game. It's tied with a few minutes to go. Let's play that game 10 times, see what happens. Carolina probably wins 5 of them. Gonzaga wins 5 of them. It's just the one that counted, the only one they did. It went Carolina's way. And this is another example of a team that's got a chance to win the national championship. And I don't mean just has a chance like, well, you know, it's a single elimination tournament. Everybody has a chance. No, everybody doesn't have a chance. I mean, everybody's in the bracket. You know, at least 55 of those teams have no realistic chance to win the national championship. Gonzaga does. The adjusted efficiency margin at KenPom is now up to plus 34.66. That's higher than what Baylor's was last season after Baylor won the national championship. And it's more than 5 points better than anybody else in the country right now. So, yeah, if the Zags are out there slapping around BYU and San Francisco and everybody else they play, I'm going to assume they do the same thing to St. Mary's on Saturday night.
Gary, St. Mary's isn't countering with a Keller Boothby who has a similar true shooting percentage.
That's exactly right.
Trivia time.
Okay.
Keller Boothby, Gary, he attended Prestonwood Christian Academy in Plano, Texas for high school.
Mm-hmm.
What current NBA All-Star also attended Prestonwood Christian Academy?
NBA All-Star in Plano, Texas. I
actually can't say for sure if he is this year, but he's been one.
He's been an All-Star.
Very, very recently, yeah.
I'm trying to think of players from the Dallas area who are great in the NBA. I'm completely blanking. I don't even have a guess for you.
Apparently, Julius Randle went there too.
Julius Randle went to school there. Julius Randle, by the way, definitely not an All-Star this season, but he has been one. He's been bad this season, but he has been an All-Star. But okay, so Keller Boothby and Julius Randle both went to the same high school. Not sure I would have guessed that, but
yeah, that's via Real GM. I looked that up while you were talking about something.
Okay, yeah, like put Keller Boothby on the St. Mary's roster. Now we got a different conversation. As it is, yeah, I'll take Gonzaga and lay the 14 points. Game 4.
Yeah, imagine being back at Prestonwood, over the summer, and your Keller Boothby and Julius Randle walks in to get some reps, and then you got to stick that guy in some pickup.
Does Julius Randle right now have any idea who Keller Boothby is?
If he's a listener to the pod, he does.
Yeah, I'm going to say probably not. Game 4, Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern, number 12 UCLA at number 21 USC inside the O.J. Mayo Center. KenPom has it UCLA -3. You can watch it on ESPN.
Yeah, I'm going UCLA. Wait, -3. Yeah, okay. I'm going UCLA. I understand that UCLA is not its best self right now. Had a couple of bad losses within the last week or so. Not that losing to Arizona is a bad loss, but losing to Arizona State definitely is. USC though, I don't necessarily believe in. And I think the Pac-12 is very mediocre. And anyway, UCLA I think is just better. I don't think that there's going to be some massive home court advantage with the crosstown setup and whatnot for USC. So UCLA I think wins this game by 6 or 7.
Yeah, USC is ranked right now. I don't have them in the top 25 and 1. Like, they have good computer numbers, but what have they done? Who have they beaten?
Yeah.
I mean, their best win's San Diego State, and that's a good win. But, like, USC sitting here 1-1 in quadrant 1. Like, they've got good computer numbers, and it's totally reasonable to rank them if you want to. That wouldn't be where I would devote a Polotex column if I were writing one. But they've got as many losses in quadrant 3 as they do in quadrant 1. I'm not saying the team's not good. I'm just saying the team hasn't done much.
Our perception, the national perception of USC was artificially inflated by their weak schedule to start out with because they were coming in off a pretty good NCAA tournament run, because Isaiah Mobley was a player people remembered who was putting up numbers. They were able to rise into the top 10 on the heels of an easy schedule. And now I think they've just been exposed a little bit, and I think they're going to make the NCAA tournament, but I don't think they're much of a threat.
Yeah, they started 13-0. So it's like, well, they were supposed to be good, and they're 13-0, and they kept moving up the rankings. And then they lost to Stanford, beat Oregon State, lose to Oregon. They've lost to Stanford twice now. Like, maybe that should be a rule. You can't lose to Stanford twice in the same season and be ranked in the AP poll, period. That's like a stipulation. They went to Arizona, lost by 9. They were in a game with Pacific earlier this week. Now, Isaiah Mobley didn't play, and that's that perhaps that accounts for that. But yeah, I just don't know. I don't. They're good. I just don't know if they're as good as they've been perceived to be this season. I don't know if they're as good as the number beside their name suggests they are. I'll take UCLA -3. You're in charge of game 5. What we got?
Yeah, going Indiana, Michigan State. A couple of teams that really, really, really need a dub here. Let me check out this KenPom line real quick. I think it is Indiana -4. So that's interesting. No. It's Michigan State -4. That makes a lot more sense because Michigan State is the home team in this game. So Michigan State -4 at home against an Indiana team that, who's playing for them? I mean, I think those 5 guys who were suspended are back, but
they are back. They have been reinstated. And by the way, Mike Woodson seemed to suggest that the reason they were suspended was because they blew curfew.
Yeah, but he didn't come out and straight up say that they were going to return to their on-court roles. He kind of was ambiguous about if they were going to be immediately part of the rotation or play their same minutes.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. The game, by the way, tips at 3:30 Eastern on Saturday. It's going to be on Fox. We'll see who plays and how much. But my understanding is they're available, and I thought it was noteworthy if this really is just a blown curfew, to take 5 players off your roster for a game, I guess it was at Northwestern, that you need as it pertains to your NCAA tournament resume, like I think that says something about Mike Woodson that I don't think is often attached to quote unquote NBA guys. Because sometimes when an NBA coach, finds himself coaching college basketball, one of the things you'll hear, not 100% of the time, but often, is they don't care about academic stuff. They don't care about any of the stuff that some college coaches really do seem to care about. They're just basketball coaches. They're not trying to turn boys into young men or whatever that cliche is. They're just coaching their basketball team the way they've coached their basketball team at the professional level. My point being, for a first-year college coach to actually suspend 5 players for curfew, if it is actually curfew, I don't want to say it's impressive because I don't even know what that means. It stood out to me. I don't know if I would have done it, given where my season is at right now and what my fans want from me, and that, it's February and every game is important. I don't know. I just thought it said something about Mike Woodson, and I think probably something positive about Mike Woodson.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, 2 starters. It was Xavier Johnson and Parker Stewart, both starters who were among that 5. 2 other guys who were role players, and then Christian Lander, who sometimes plays. He was among that group as well. So, yeah, definitely a bold move. I'm going Michigan State. I don't think they're going to lose consecutive home games. I think they've struggled recently. They're kind of in the spot right now where their legitimacy is in question. They're doing a reverse Izzo where they're seeming to backslide as we get deeper into the season, and I don't know I just don't think that's going to continue. I think they're going to get it done at home here, and I think there's some questions. I mean, just for me about this situation with Indiana, where I don't know that I fully trust the best version of Indiana to show up in the first game after this suspension situation. So I'm going Sparty.
Yeah, Indiana's lost 2 straight. Michigan State, as you noted, has also lost 2 straight. This is important for both teams. Yeah. You know what? I'll take Indiana plus the points. I think Michigan State wins the game, but I think it'll be a competitive game pretty much from start to finish. And I don't guess I'd be shocked if Indiana went to the Breslin Center and won, given that, we just watched Illinois we just watched Wisconsin go to the Breslin Center and win. So I'll take Indiana plus the points, and then by Saturday afternoon, we'll know for sure. Either the internet will be working perfectly throughout the state, or they'll be having bandwidth problems again. It's tough to tell.
And David Cobb will have an even wider lead in the Final Four and 1.
Woo! You are wearing us out in the Final Four and 1. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It's always good when not good when Norlander's away. I don't mean it that way, but it's nice to have somebody reliable and of quality to sit in that other box across from me. So I appreciate
that means a lot, Gary. People need to know how important you are. I heard you guys talking with Sam Vecini a couple weeks ago. And Sam was just lavishing you with praise for the fact that that he was once employed by CBS, and I need to give you a similar shout out too. I mean, I was like, man, Gary needs some love because I hit you up a couple years ago. I was like, hey, what do you know about this? And you didn't even know me that well. I mean, I've been on your show a handful of times, and obviously we ran in the Memphis media market, and you put in a word, got my resume to the top of a pile somewhere, and here we are. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. I didn't know you too well, but I knew your work, and for these purposes, that's what I needed to know. I was like, this is because like your background is vastly different than say Sam Vecini's background. Sam Vecini, had never worked at a traditional newspaper, never been on a beat. He's awesome, but like you guys come from totally different places. And I just remember when we had an opening, reaching out, after being in contact with you, reaching out to the bosses. And I actually said, hey, this guy lives in Memphis. I don't know if you want another guy who lives in Memphis, like, but he's good. And I bet you're not going to have a more qualified candidate than David. So just take a look at it, and then you guys take it from here. So I'm not going to take credit for hiring you because I didn't do that. I don't have that kind of power, but I did endorse you, and I'm glad I did, because otherwise I have no idea who I'd be talking to right now.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know that Julius Randle and Keller Boothby attended the same high school.
I tell you, that's not something Norlander would have come with. It's not something Deadleg would have had for me. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Gary Franklin, legend. Shouts to Larnell. Thank you guys once again for listening to the Iron College Basketball Podcast in the middle of the dumbest pandemic of my lifetime. I swear to you, I've never seen one like this. Wild. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can leave 5 stars at both. Please do. That's very important. And at Apple, you can actually leave a review, like type some words, and that's incredibly important too. So if you got 45 seconds, do that for us. There's more of us than there are of them. There's way more of us than there are of them. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, we've been begging you for months. Like, come on already. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And while you're here, please smash that like button like you're Brandon Davies. Brandon Davies would do it. He'd smash it. He'd risk everything to smash. You're not risking anything. So please do that. And we're going to talk to you again on not Sunday. We're not going to talk to you again on Super Bowl Sunday. Deadleg was like, one option is we could do it after the Super Bowl. And I'm like, there's no scenario where I'm doing a podcast after the Super Bowl. What are you talking about? So we're going to talk to you again on Monday morning. I think we're going to try to go 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday morning, and we will recap the weekend then. So till then, take care.